used to believe that love, real love, was unbreakable. Mark and I had been married for 7 years. 7 years of inside jokes, quiet breakfasts, and movie nights, tangled up under the same old blanket. We were the couple our friends admired. Stable, funny, and seemingly perfect. But I had started noticing the small cracks. The way he hid his phone when I walked into the room. How he suddenly started wearing cologne again. Or the way he smiled a little too brightly when work called late at night. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Mark had been my best friend before he was my husband. But deep down, that quiet ache in my chest whispered otherwise. Then one night, while doing laundry, I found lipstick on the collar of his undershirt. Not my shade, not even close. My hand shook as I stared at it. That tiny red smear felt like a full-blown confession written in wax. For a few days I tried to ignore it, but the silence between us grew thick, uncomfortable, like a storm waiting to break. Then I got my confirmation. Mark had left his iPad on the kitchen counter. It pinged with a message. I shouldn't have looked, but curiosity was already a fire I couldn't put out. The message read, "Can't wait for tonight, baby. Bring the good stuff." I clicked through. Dozens of texts, photos, videos, all with a woman named Tessa. I felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. There it was, undeniable proof. He wasn't just cheating, he was emotionally invested. He called her sweetheart. He told her things he hadn't told me in years. That night, when he came home smelling like work, I couldn't even look at him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because in that moment, something inside me hardened. Revenge wasn't my first thought. At first, I wanted closure. I wanted him to admit it, to see the guilt in his eyes. But when I confronted him, Mark gaslit me. He laughed, said I was crazy, said I was jealous and making things up. He told me, "You've been watching too many dramas, Emma. Maybe you should see someone about your imagination." That broke something in me. The betrayal was one thing, but the mockery, that smug smirk, was something else entirely. That's when I decided he needed a taste of his own medicine. And oh, fate was kind enough to hand me the perfect opportunity. A few nights later, Mark told me he was going to the gym. But when I peeked into his gym bag out of suspicion, I found something that made my stomach twist. A bottle of lube. I wasn't naive. I knew what it was for and who it was for. And that's when the idea struck me. Not out of malice, but out of poetic justice. If he wanted to play games behind my back, maybe it was time I joined the game too. Except I'd play smarter. The next day, while Mark was at work, I went to the art supply store. I bought a small bottle of clear-drying craft glue. Same consistency, same texture, same color as the lube he used. When I got home, I carefully poured out half of the original bottle and replaced it with glue. I even shook it, just enough to make it believable. I told myself I was doing it just to mess with him, to scare him a little. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would actually harm anyone. But as I put the bottle back in his bag, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. He had glued himself to lies for months. Maybe now he'd get a taste of what that really felt like. Mark came home that evening humming. I could tell from his mood that he was planning something. He took a quick shower, sprayed on his expensive cologne, and grabbed his gym bag. "Late night workout again?" I asked sweetly. "Yeah," he replied, barely meeting my eyes. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Have fun." As the door closed behind him, My heart raced, not with love, but anticipation. I sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly, pretending everything was normal. But inside, I was trembling. Was I really doing this? Half of me wanted him to get caught. The other half wanted him to come home and confess before it went too far. He didn't. It was 10:47 p.m. when my phone rang. Unknown number. When I answered, I heard chaos in the background. Sirens, shouting, muffled panic. A woman's voice said, "Is this Emma Walters?" "Yes. This is the fire department. Your husband's been in an incident." My heart stopped. They wouldn't say more on the phone, only that he was stuck and they needed to cut him free. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. I drove to the address they gave me, an apartment complex I didn't recognize. When I arrived, there were firefighters outside, paramedics, and one furious woman yelling from a window. And there, amidst all the commotion, was Mark. Half-clothed, mortified, trying to explain himself to the firefighters who could barely keep a straight face. It turned out the glue had done its job a little too well. By the time they managed to separate them, with minimal damage but maximum humiliation, half the neighborhood had gathered to watch. Mark was beet red, wrapped in a blanket, refusing to look at anyone. The other woman, Tessa, was crying hysterically, yelling that it was all my fault. I just stood there, calm, quiet. One of the firefighters, a kind older man, approached me later and said softly, "Ma'am, I'm guessing this wasn't exactly an accident, huh?" I didn't respond. I just smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes people get stuck in the messes they make." He chuckled, nodded, and walked away. For the first time in months, I felt light. The next morning, Mark came home, his face pale with shame. He tried to spin a story, something about a prank gone wrong. But the truth was already all over social media. Someone had filmed the whole thing. The firefighters, the screams, the chaos. It went viral within hours. I didn't post it. I didn't have to. The universe had done that for me. He begged me to keep it private, to not ruin his reputation. I looked at him and said, "You ruined that yourself." He moved out 2 days later. But what surprised me most wasn't the freedom I felt. It was the quiet sadness underneath. Because even after everything, a small part of me still loved the man I thought he was. A few weeks passed. Friends called me legendary. My story became a kind of urban myth. The woman who glued her cheating husband to his mistress. But the truth, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like letting go of a dream I had built for years. One afternoon, I went to drop off some old boxes at the community center. The same firefighter who'd spoken to me that night was there, volunteering. He recognized me instantly. "How's the glue queen doing?" he joked. I laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. We talked for an hour about life, second chances, and how sometimes things have to break apart before they can fall into place. He told me something I never forgot. Sometimes justice feels sweet, but healing feels better. That night, I finally deleted Mark's number. Not out of anger, but peace. Because sometimes karma isn't about revenge. It's about finally setting yourself free. The story had gone everywhere. Within days, my phone was filled with messages. Friends sending memes, strangers commenting on posts saying things like, "Queen behavior. She deserves a medal. That man got what he glued himself into." It was surreal. At first, I laughed along. It felt empowering to see the internet take my pain and spin it into a kind of poetic justice. But the truth was, I wasn't celebrating. I was exhausted. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed that moment in the parking lot. The firefighters, the humiliation, the disbelief on Mark's face. I had gotten my revenge, yes. But now, I had to live with what came after. And what came after was silence. Mark had moved out, leaving behind only the echoes of our life together. His toothbrush still sat in the bathroom cup. His old hoodie still hung by the door. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Not yet. Because the truth was, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad. Sad that the man who once held my hand through life's storms was now just a stranger with a viral headline. I realized something then. Revenge doesn't heal you. It distracts you. For a while, it makes the pain feel powerful, like you're in control. But when the noise fades, you're left with yourself. And the quiet question of what now? 3 weeks later, I received a message. It was from Mark. Emma, can we talk? Please. At first, I ignored it, but something in me, curiosity, closure maybe, made me agree to meet him. We met at a small cafe we used to love. He looked older, not just tired, aged, the kind of aging that comes from regret. He said, I deserve what happened. I know that, but I lost everything, Em. My job found out. Tessa moved out of town. My parents won't even talk to me. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. Then he said something I didn't expect. I'm sorry, not for what happened that night, but for every moment I made you doubt yourself. Tears burned my eyes, not because I forgave him right away, but because for the first time he was finally honest. We talked for nearly 2 hours. He told me he had started therapy, that he was trying to understand why he'd cheated, why he'd lied, why he had become someone he didn't even respect anymore. He admitted that losing everything had been a wake-up call, one that came glued with humiliation, but also clarity. And while I didn't tell him this out loud, a part of me was proud of him. Because sometimes people don't change until the world forces them to look in the mirror, and he finally was. When we left the cafe, he said softly, You didn't just expose me, you saved me. I didn't respond. I just smiled sadly and walked away, knowing that forgiveness was starting, not for him, but for me. In the weeks that followed, I began something new, rebuilding myself. I signed up for pottery classes. I started journaling every morning. I even reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with while being Mark's wife. And slowly I started to feel like me again. Not the angry, heartbroken Emma, but the creative, hopeful woman I used to be before marriage consumed me. One day, while molding clay into a vase, I realized something profound. The process of pottery is a lot like healing. You break, you soften, you reshape, and in the end, you're stronger for having been remade. Remember that kind firefighter from the night of the incident? His name was Nathan. I ran into him again at the local market one morning. He was in uniform, holding a box of apples. He grinned when he saw me. Glue girl, haven't seen you around. I laughed, trying to stay out of the headlines lately. We ended up grabbing coffee, and what was supposed to be a quick chat turned into 3 hours of laughter and shared stories. He was gentle, grounded, and refreshingly real. He didn't see me as the woman from the viral story, just Emma. And that felt like sunlight after months of rain. Nathan and I started seeing each other often, coffee, walks, community events. He had been divorced for years, and we bonded over our shared scars. The lessons that heartbreak leaves behind. He once told me, the worst fires don't just destroy, they clear the land for new growth. Those words stuck with me because that's what life felt like now. A scorched field, slowly sprouting green again. I wasn't sure if what we had was love yet, but it was healing. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Months later, I got a notification on social media. Mark had posted a public apology. Not one of those forced PR-style notes, but a heartfelt confession. He wrote, "To my ex-wife, Emma, you didn't just teach me a lesson. You gave me a chance to become better. You exposed the worst in me, but also gave me a reason to change. I hope you're happy now. You deserve to be." The comments were flooded with support. For me, for him, for the strange, messy beauty of redemption. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. Because the man who once lied to me had finally told the truth. To the world and to himself. One evening, as I was closing my pottery studio, yes, I opened one eventually, Glue and Clay, cheekily named, Nathan stopped by with dinner and flowers. We sat under fairy lights, eating takeout from the same cafe where I'd met Mark months before. Nathan said, "You ever think about how that one crazy night changed everything?" I smiled. If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have found myself again. He nodded. Life's funny like that. Sometimes what breaks you isn't a punishment, it's preparation. And I realized he was right. That moment of chaos, that act of revenge, it had been the spark that burned away everything false in my life, leaving only what was real. A year later, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment event. The organizer had heard my story and wanted me to share it. Not the viral, sensationalized version, but the real one. I stood on stage, looking out at hundreds of faces. And I said, I swapped my cheating husband's lube for glue. But what I really swapped was bitterness for freedom. The audience laughed, then grew quiet as I continued. Revenge might feel satisfying, but healing is what truly sets you free. I thought I wanted him to hurt like I did, but what I really wanted was to remember who I was before the hurt. And I did. After the speech, people hugged me, thanked me, cried with me. That night, as I drove home, Nathan reached over, took my hand and said, "You turned glue into gold, Emma." I laughed, tears in my eyes. Because maybe life's messiest moments aren't meant to destroy us. They're meant to stick us to the lessons we need most. And that, I realized, was the real story. Not about revenge, not about betrayal, but about becoming whole again.